Yoon's toothbrush was pristine. It stood tall in the center of the white ceramic holder that their mother had picked out, with every white and blue bristle in perfect order. There was not a hint of crusted toothpaste or a bent bristle in sight. The toothpaste tube, sitting beside it on the sink, was almost full as well. It wasn't crumpled up in the middle with sticky strings clinging to the plastic cap. Everything was straight, plump, and perfect. And it might have well been, because Yoon never brushed her teeth. There wasn't a good reason for it. She just forgot most of the time. And no one could really tell anyway. She didn't have any painful cavities or black pits in the surface of her enamel. When she smiled, it was mostly white. Ivory was the natural color of teeth anyway. If she got really self-conscious, she would grab some floss before she went to bed. Her gums always gushed blood like a faucet, but they figured that meant the floss was working. Chewing gum was just easier, and it was just as effective in her opinion. Sometimes she would steal Listerine from her mom's bathroom cabinet and swish. That always helped her feel right as rain. When she used mouthwash, she felt like she was finally on the path towards getting her life in order. But then it all went to shit when her mother grabbed her chin and pushed her fingers up underneath her chapped lips. Yoon winced when the cold air hit their exposed teeth. She had just been sitting at the kitchen table with a glass of Coke. She hadn't even gotten past the first sip.
Jesus Christ, Yoon,
her mom grimaced.
Haven't you been brushing?
Yoon wrenched her head away and swiped the back of her hand across her mouth.
Yes,
Yoon muttered.
Don't lie to me.
Her mother went to grab her face again, but Yoon slipped out from her grip like a bar of soap.
I do brush,
Yoon insisted.
And my teeth are fine. They are not fine,
her mother said.
You look like you could be a poster child for periodontal disease.
She rubbed her face.
I'm going to make you an appointment with the dentist.
Yoon scrunched up her mouth and covered it with both her hands.
I'll start brushing. Yes, you will,
her mom agreed.
But you're due for a cleaning anyway. Your gums aren't supposed to be red like that, Yoon.
Her mother picked up her worn planner. The flimsy cover creased in multiple places from having been bent in all directions over the course of the year. She was almost towards the end, and she had to flip past a rainforest of green tabs before hitting the last few weeks of the year.
Before Christmas?
Yoon turned around in her chair and tucked her knees up. She rested her chin on the back of the chair and looked up at her mom with what she hoped were pitiful eyes.
Yes, Yoon,
her mother said.
If we're lucky. Dr. Pitvoris doesn't leave until the week before, I think.
She trailed off and started muttering to herself. She picked up her phone and turned it around in her hands. The bright LED screen flashing colors in Yoon's peripheral vision before going dark, and then flashing again only seconds later.
Why not after Christmas?
Yoon asked.
Because I don't want all your teeth to fall out, and we have to take pictures.
Her mother sounded dry and sarcastic. It was obvious that she was through with the conversation. Yoon turned around in her seat and slid until she was slumped so far down that her nose was nearly underneath the table. She only sat back up to grab her Coke. When she finally got to drink it, it was warm. A package arrived on their doorstep only a few days after the kitchen interrogation. Yoon's mother brought it in and set it down in the middle of the living room floor without much fanfare. Yoon tried to catch a peek, slipping around one of the big white plaster columns that pretended to hold up the ceiling. Her fingers squeaked across the shiny material as she swung.
Don't do that,
her mother said. She didn't even look up.
Come look at what I ordered.
Yoon pursed her lips and held back a sigh. She sprang off the edge of the column's base and launched herself towards the carpet where their mother had planted herself with the box.
Is it my Christmas present?
Yoon asked. She knew the answer, but she liked seeing the annoyed look that crossed her mother's face anyway.
No,
her mom said.
This isn't your Christmas present. It's something I ordered to help you get through the next few weeks. Dr. Pitvoris took his vacation early, and he won't be back until after New Year's."
As she spoke, she picked up a miniature pocket knife and slid it down the top line of tape. The ritual itself reminded her of when her daddy started using his keys to pry open boxes on Christmas morning.
"Oh, goody,"
Yoon said.
"Listen,"
Her mother said.
"I am not the one who hasn't been brushing their teeth for all this time. And I'm not the one spitting blood into the sink when I rise. Now, look at this."
She reached into the box and pulled out a series of bottles. She lined them up on the carpet triumphantly, as though each one was a trophy. All the plastic bottles had that sort of jewel-shaped bottom that reminded Yoon of spell jars. Each one was filled with a different colored liquid: red, pink, blue, green, and then a very unappealing-looking yellow. All the bottles had a label slapped on them that said,
"Wilson and Wong's Fun-Sized History,"
which was, in her opinion, a weird name for mouthwash. Weirder still were the names of each flavor. There wasn't any sort of real description like cinnamon, bubblegum, or mint. They were just words like Rome, Egypt, Middle Earth, Atlantis, and Greece.
"What do these taste like?"
Yoon asked. She tried not to look too interested or too visibly disgusted. She didn't want to have to try them all out for herself in some sort of horrifying mouthwash roulette.
"I have no idea,"
Yoon's mother said. She pulled the packing slip out of the box and then nudged it away with her foot.
"I just asked them to send me whatever they had available. You didn't get to pick?"
Yoon was even more suspicious. She lowered herself down onto the carpet until she was stretched out on her belly. She rested her chin on the back of her hands and stared at Rome as sunlight streaming through the windows bounced off its ruby-red depths.
"No, I didn't get to pick. I filled out a form online and requested a sample package. I told them to send me whatever they had. I've never heard of this brand before, but it promises to transform your mouth."
Yoon sat up and grabbed one of the bottles.
"These are big." "I know. I wasn't expecting it either." "Do I have to use it, even if I don't like it?"
She asked.
"Yes,"
Her mother said as she stood.
"You know that we don't waste in this house. I could give it to Dad. Dad brushes his teeth."
Her mother reminded her, and then walked away. Yoon scoffed under her breath and turned the bottle over to look at the back. There was nothing on the label there except a gold star that advertised
135 different flavors.
Yoon unscrewed Rome's cap and tilted the bottle towards her nose. It smelled like big red gum, and the scent was so overpowering that it made her eyes water. Yoon pulled it away from her face just in time to sneeze. She gripped the plastic neck so as not to spill any. Otherwise, her mother would mount her head above the fireplace with the white-tailed buck. She thought about sniffing the yellow one named Grease, but just thinking about what it could smell like was enough to make her stomach turn. Yoon replaced the cap and left the mouthwash bottles on the floor as they stood. Yoon spent the rest of the day hoping that her mother had forgotten about the mouthwash. It wasn't until she started getting ready for bed that she saw Rome sitting on their bathroom sink like a big red fire truck. Yoon groaned and grabbed it by the plastic neck. She unscrewed the cap and bent over to sniff it again. It made her sneeze. She dripped a little into the sink and then glanced over her shoulder frantically, as if her mother would be hovering like some sort of poltergeist. Yoon set the bottle down and did the brushing first. The cold water hurt, and brushing too close to the gum sent spikes of pain down into her jaw. When Yoon rinsed off her brush, the sink was full of bright pink blood. She flossed, but it felt useless. Each waxy strand snagged on her teeth and made them wince. She wouldn't have done it at all, except she knew that her mother would check. Besides, ever since she had said something, Yoon was starting to notice little ivory stones breaking off onto her tongue. She didn't know if it was pieces of her teeth breaking up and floating away, or if it was something else. But every time it happened, it made her heart race a little faster. Besides, if she could get good enough at brushing their teeth, maybe they wouldn't need to go to the dentist. That was what she wanted to avoid the most. After brushing, Yoon stared down the big red bottle of mouthwash like it was the front line of an advancing enemy. She finally gathered enough courage to tip it over a small paper cup and fill it to the brim. Yoon's mouth started watering before she even drank the stuff. The taste of cinnamon was overpowering and pinged off every single taste bud on the surface of her tongue. It was like trying to swallow a match and having every piece of tissue burn up before it could go out. Underneath the cinnamon was a weird, sharp taste that was like breathing too deeply in the tire section of the home improvement store. Yoon's cheeks bulged out as they tried to put as much of a gap between them and the liquid as they could. She shook her whole head from side to side. The mouthwash sloshed around behind her teeth for as long as they could stand it, and then she all but vomited it back into the sink. The mouthwash splashed red against the white ceramic, like the sink was full of blood. Seconds later, it all slithered down the drain, and eventually Yoon recovered enough to fill her palm with water and splash the sides to chase it down.
That shit was awful,
she thought, as she spat again and rinsed her mouth out with some cold tap water. Maybe it just wasn't her flavor. Or maybe there was a reason the company had been giving the stuff away. She thought about telling her mother, but she doubted she would care. She was too tired anyway. Yoon trudged towards bed and didn't even bother flipping out the bathroom light, which would really tick off her mom for sure. Yoon dreamt that her teeth were falling out. In the dream, she stood in front of her bathroom mirror, trying to brush because she was getting ready for some big event. When the bristles scraped across her back tooth, she felt it wiggle. Yoon dragged the toothbrush back and forth a few more times to see if the tooth kept wiggling. It seemed to get looser each time. Finally, she gave up and reached into her mouth, prodding the tooth with the tip of her finger, feeling how loose it actually was. The tooth rocked back and forth, barely hanging onto the gum by a thread. Yoon winced and opened her mouth a little wider. Blood and spit streamed from the center of her lip, and she shoved in as many of her fingers as possible to try and grip the tooth. Except it wouldn't come out. She had to unscrew it like a cap. Finally, when she pulled the tooth out and held it up to the light, there was a speck of black in the very center. Dream Yoon freaked out because it looked like an ant. But when she got a little closer, she noticed that the speck was more person-shaped than bug-shaped. That freaked her out enough to pull her out of the dream. Yoon sat upright in her bed and tried to gasp, but her jaw felt like it was locked in place. The rest of her could move, so she reached up and touched her chin first and then her jaw, gingerly massaging the hinges. When she could move her mouth again, she felt something rattling between her teeth. The sensation reminded her of grabbing hard bubblegum from a grocery store dispenser, except it was the middle of the night, and she had not been chewing any gum. Yoon used her tongue to bat the clacking object up to the front of her mouth and then spit it out into her hand. Staring back up at her was a broken, almost white tooth. Horror twisted Yoon's stomach, and she felt like she was going to vomit. She pulled the tooth closer to her face for inspection, but did not see a suspicious human or ant-shaped speck in the middle. She glanced at her bedroom door, as if her mother was going to come banging in and start gloating over the consequences of her poor dental hygiene.
Yeah, she can't see this.
Yoon stashed the tooth behind her bedside lamp and then glanced at her charging phone screen. It was almost midnight. She had barely been asleep for 2 hours. Yoon swiped her tongue around her mouth again, prodding the hole that had been left behind. She shivered at the icky sensation of having what felt like such a deep, gaping wound in her gum. She lingered over that feeling for only half a second more before she lowered herself back down to the bed. Then her head hit the pillow again, and she promptly forgot that she had stashed the tooth at all. A few days later, Yoon had not told her mother about the tooth. It was too close to Christmas to risk getting her all worked up. It would come up at the dentist anyway, and there was nothing Yoon could do about it now. So, why sweat it? She had completely forgotten about stowing the tooth behind her lamp until she saw a mass of little ant-like bodies trotting across the surface of her bedside table, and everything came back to her in a sudden swing of revulsion. She remembered everything, the dream and the tooth. She swept everything she loved off the nightstand to keep it all from being contaminated. She practically threw the lamp when pulling it back to look for the tooth. She finally found it, being swarmed by the little marching bodies that were not completely black in actuality. They were more off-white than anything, with little black specks for arms and legs. They looked like humans more than bugs, if humans were made of rock-hard black. Yoon did not understand what she was seeing. The little black humans were all over her tooth, which had been turned over onto its jagged side, and the opening had been carved into some strange, indistinct shape. It was all so teeny tiny and difficult to see. Yoon grabbed her phone and turned on the camera, using the zoom feature to try and get an even better look at what was going on. Even though the zoom made everything grainy, she could see that the jagged opening was being chipped away with even tinier tools wielded by black human hands. The structure resembled one of the Colosseums that Yoon had seen in her history textbook. Yoon pulled her phone away and slid back another foot across her bed. Her instinct was to slam her fist down onto the little structure and crush it, possibly sweep it off into the carpet and suck it all up with a vacuum. Those could not be actual humans after all. So what kind of awful, invasive little buggy creatures were they? And had they found the tooth, or had they come from the tooth? The idea of those little things living inside Yoon's gum, chipping away at the roots until they could push the whole tooth out, and then springing free from the hole, was enough to make her dizzy. She gripped the nearest stuffed animal on her bed and brought it close to her face, squeezing it and forcing herself to take deep breaths to avoid a full-blown panic. She raised her hand to sweep the little horrible creatures away, but she couldn't stop picturing a dozen little voices screaming at the top of their lungs as they went crashing to the carpet. Yoon bit her bottom lip and set the lamp on top of the tooth instead. The little guys could live underneath it. She didn't care, as long as Yoon didn't have to look at them. She rolled over onto the other side of her bed and wiggled underneath the covers. Within a couple of days, the little black men had stopped moving. Yoon found it similar to an incident in kindergarten when all her sea monkeys had sort of floated towards the bottom of their pink plastic tank. Except this felt just a little bit more crushing. Somehow, it felt like it was all their fault. She had not used the mouthwash since the first time, but she kept telling her mother that she had. After sweeping the little still black men and the carved-up tooth into the trash, Yoon went into the bathroom and picked up the bottle.
"Teeth strong enough to build cities,"
it said on the front. Yoon gave the glossy silver label a long, hard stare. What was the secret then? The better her teeth, the longer the little black men ants would live? Would they build more cities? Would Yoon lose her teeth every time she rinsed with the mouthwash? There was more to that logic as well. The fewer teeth Yoon had, the fewer reasons there would be to go to the dentist, or to brush at all. It would be like some kind of build-your-own ant farm with added benefits. But she wouldn't know for sure until she tried. Yoon unscrewed the cap of the mouthwash and tipped the bottle to fill a little paper cup. She filled the cup almost to the top and then bared her teeth in the mirror, using the tip of her finger to count each one as they went along. 1, 2, 3, 4, more and more and more. That was an awful lot of cities. SCP-2026 refers to a collection of mouthwash products labeled on their packaging as Wilson and Wong's Fun Size History. Currently, 135 bottles are possessed by the Foundation. Analysis of the chemical structures of the packages and the mouthwash itself reveals no detectable anomalous properties. 15 flavors of SCP-2026 have been identified by the Foundation. 10 of these flavors have names corresponding to past human civilizations, while 5 flavors have names referring to fictional literary civilizations. SCP-2026's anomalous properties will manifest when utilized for mouthwashing by a human. Approximately 2 hours after use, one of the user's teeth will fall out, with no apparent pattern to the specific tooth selected. After 3 days, the lost tooth will regrow itself in the subject. Over the next 7 days, the fallen tooth will suffer a transformation. Sections of the tooth will gradually be converted into a varying number of small, sapient human figures made out of the pulp and enamel. This phenomenon will only occur if the affected subject regularly practices good dental hygiene. If not, the transformative process will cease after several days. These figures, hereafter designated SCP-2026-1, will begin to build complex architectural structures out of the affected tooth. The nature of SCP-2026-1 and the structures depends on the flavor of SCP-2026 used. Instances of SCP-2026-1 are capable of speaking, writing, and reading in language corresponding to the flavor's civilization. Instances of SCP-2026-1 will continue to build more structures out of any nearby solid materials, including plastic, concrete, steel, glass, paper, and electronic devices. Instances of SCP-2026-1 will not build structures out of any living tissue. In addition to human flesh, the only other material encountered so far which is not converted by instances of SCP-2026-1 is wood, which has proven effective at preventing the expansion of SCP-2026-1. To hear more stories like this, be sure to hit subscribe and turn notifications on. I'll see you in the next one.